Time to talk to the opposition and get comments on all of the day's news. We're joined now by the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Let's start with what you're announcing today. This is a proposed amendment to the government's crime and policing bill. Talk us through it.
Yeah, so I'm very concerned that in recent years the police have been wasting colossal amounts of time on so-called non-crime hate incidents, which, as the name implies, are not criminal, but might include talking to people who've made a comment on Twitter about the trans issue. It's included even children having arguments in playgrounds. They've investigated and recorded those incidents, and I think that's a problem for two reasons. Firstly, it is wasting police time which should be spent investigating burglary or car theft or mobile phone theft and those kind of things. They're recording over 10,000 of these incidents a year, taking up 60,000 hours of time. I think that is time badly spent. It should be spent catching real criminals. And secondly, it risks infringing free speech, where they're investigating and recording what people are saying online. I think the only time the police should be recording non-criminal activity is if it is an immediate, or likely to be, an immediate precursor to real criminality, as you'd expect with any criminal offence or potential criminal offence. But they should not be policing Twitter. They're not the thought police. This has gone on for too long, and it's simply got to stop.
So obviously you're trying to achieve this change by proposing a change to a current government bill that's in the process of the crime and policing bill. But the thing you're trying to change has evolved over the last decade or so. I guess you'd have to acknowledge through a lack of legislation of this ilk from yourselves in government.
Well, it's evolved over 25 years. It was first introduced in the early 2000s during the time of the Blair government, not on a legal footing. It was done in police guidance, essentially. Now, we tried about 2 years ago in government to tighten this up via a previous bit of legislation, but that essentially didn't work, so we need to go further and just abolish these things entirely, and that is the proposal that we're now making. We'll put it as an amendment to the bill now going through Parliament. We'll put it to a vote, and we'll find out if Labour are really on the side of common sense, if they're really on the side of making sure the police concentrate on real crime, not policing Twitter. We'll put it to a vote. We'll be voting for it on the Conservative side. We'll see what Labour do. But they've actually already come out just this morning saying they're not going to support it. So we can see that Labour are not on the side of common sense here.
I guess maybe you can argue you're on the side of common sense now, but you failed to act on it for 14 years, as you said, if it started in the early 2000s.
Yeah, we did legislate about 2 years ago, but that didn't work, speaking honestly, and that's why we now need to go further. I'm just being very honest about that.
Which is good to hear. Let's touch on the Supreme Court decision last week. Do you welcome the decision ultimately?
Yeah, I very strongly welcome it. I think it makes complete sense that when it comes to protecting women's rights, that it should be determined by biological sex, birth sex, when it comes to kind of female spaces like changing rooms, and when it also comes, frankly, to competing in competitive sport as well. That should be based on biological sex. Keir Starmer's been all over the place on this. He claimed a year or two ago that women could have penises, which is ridiculous. He even drove Rosie Duffield out of the Labour Party for taking a common-sense view of this issue, which has now been vindicated by the Supreme Court judgment. So Keir Starmer should apologise to the country for what he said a few years ago. He should particularly apologise to Rosie Duffield for driving her out of the Labour Party on this issue. So I completely welcome the Supreme Court judgment. I'm very concerned that some Labour ministers, including apparently Angela Eagle and Chris Bryant, two quite senior Labour ministers, are apparently conspiring via some sort of WhatsApp group to try and undermine or circumvent this judgment. So I think Labour, both Keir Starmer personally and the Labour government more widely, have a lot of questions to answer on this. Keir Starmer has been totally silent on this issue for the last 6 or 7 days since that ruling came out.
What did you make of some of the placards, the comments during protests that we saw over the weekend?
Well, I think some of that... Clearly, I support the right to peaceful protest. Obviously, we're a democracy, we're a free country. However, some of the behaviour we saw crossed the line into the criminal. So criminal damage to statues just around the corner from where we're now sitting in Parliament Square is criminal. Criminal damage is an offence. Those people should be identified and prosecuted. There was a placard held up at one of these protests saying something like, the only good turf is a dead turf. Well, that is an incitement to violence. That is completely unacceptable. So those sort of behaviours, I think, should be prosecuted where the criminal threshold is met.
Just to circle things back, though, based on what you're saying about non-crime hate incidents, if your amendment was passed and the law was changed, is some of the scale of protest that we saw yesterday something that you think should be allowed in the medium to long term?
Well, I think there's a line which Parliament defines, right? What is criminal and what is not criminal. So, for example, defacing statues on Parliament Square is criminal damage. That is a criminal offence. There are certain types of speech which are also criminal. For example, inciting racial or religious hatred is a criminal offence. Expressing support for a banned terrorist organisation like Hamas is a criminal offence. Using abusive language to harass somebody is a criminal offence. So there are some things which are criminal. Parliament has decided where that boundary is. And of course, in Parliament, we can move that boundary by changing the law. And the police should be policing to that criminal boundary, not going after, journalists like Alison Pearson, who was debating on Twitter the trans issue, or children involved in playground arguments. And under the non-crime hate incident framework, as it stands today, the police have been wasting their time on all of that kind of thing, which is not what the police is here for. They should be catching real criminals, and that's why we've got to abolish non-crime hate incidents.
Chris Philp, good to see you today. Thanks for stopping by.
Thank you.